Man, this is Deion Dawkins, man, and you're listening to The Scoop on owlscoop.com. You already know.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Scoop, owlscoop.com's podcast, Season 7, Episode 20. Happy New Year, everybody. I'm John DiCarlo. We got a full house today. Kyle Gauss, Sam Cohn, Javon Edmonds, Dante Colinelli. Happy New Year, guys. What's going on?
Happy New Year, John. What'd you do for New Year's?
We ordered takeout and stayed home.
This is a better question. How was your holiday? Because the last time we were on this podcast, we spent a good 45 minutes talking about Christmas.
It was good. It was good. I got to see my parents.
You wrote a great piece for the Inquirer.
Thank you very much.
A tear-jerking piece.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate that. Yeah, grateful that my dad's still around. I'm grateful that our dog Sam is still around. So yeah, just spent some time here. Spent some time at my parents' place. They were able to come out here, watch some Christmas movies, and ate a lot. Saw my brother and sister-in-law, my nephew. So it was good. What have you guys been up to?
All right, enough holiday banter.
That's a shot at me because I have in our script under the intro, I actually typed out holiday banter, and everybody had a good time with that before we started recording. And
these were good.
Yeah.
New Year's, I might be asleep by 9:30 on New Year's. Just no desire to do it. I did find out that apparently when you're on the West Coast, I always assumed that they were just watching like the live New Year's. No, West Coast channels will just delay until like 9 p.m. So they'll air it at 9 p.m. as if it's like, oh, this is 9 p.m. It's the ball's dropping. The ball's already dropped.
No way.
Why?
I didn't know that.
You know what I've realized is that New Year's Rockin' Eve has become the primary space for celebrities to be intoxicated on television.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're just cool with it.
Isn't that like all Anderson Cooper does? He just gets like blackout drunk on like New Year's Eve, and they're like, look at him, his hair.
Yeah, they love it. They absolutely love it.
We have a member of the Owl Scoop squad in the COVID protocol right now, and he lives in a city that starts with a B and ends with an E. And he's very disappointed about his fantasy team. But Javon Edmonds is toughing through it. If you could see him right now, he's drinking tea.
Yes, in the wise words of somebody we all once knew, very disappointed with the outcome. We'll certainly correct that in practice this week, and just move forward from there.
A ton of stuff to get into today. A ton of mailbag questions. Really appreciate that, and a lot, of course, to dive into with Stan Drayton's staff, which is really starting to take shape here. I thought we'd mix in, a mailbag question to start things off here because it's pertinent to 95% of what we're going to be talking about today. And this first one is from Green Street Owl. Again, these are coming from our owlscoop.com message board about the new football staff. So this is a 4-part question. And again, it covers a lot of what we'd be talking about. Give it an overall grade is number 1. What's the best hire, even though not all the hires are official yet? Number 3, who was most unexpected? And number 4, can you do a brief preview of what we might expect philosophically on both sides of the ball? So can we give this an overall grade yet? I mean, like the coordinators seem to be in place for the most part. We've got hopefully got a story coming up, a couple of stories coming up from Dante. We'll talk about that when we get into things philosophically on both sides of the ball, but I'll go around the horn here. What do we think so far of the staff? I think Everett Withers, getting him as your chief of staff is pretty interesting. Kyle talked about the fact that, he might've been a name that you thought might be in the mix for defensive coordinator, right? So
yeah, I think sorry, I'll just segue off of that real quick. I mean, I think I literally texted you back in like December saying I thought he was going to be the defensive coordinator. I think the fact that you got somebody who was an FBS head coach not that long ago, was a defensive coordinator 3 months ago, was in the NFL 15 months ago, whatever it might be, that he's just your chief of staff now is interesting. I don't know if that's a result. People are hypothesizing, Temple must really be opening up the wallet for this, or it might just be a situation where Everett Withers was looking for a landing spot for a year and figured he would go with somebody he trusted. But that's an interesting name to me at this point. But do we want to talk about just overall feelings on the staff?
Yeah, I mean, we know that there are two spots that still need to be filled, right? Maybe a cornerbacks coach, whatever they do with that 10th
I would assume
spot.
definitely a cornerbacks coach, because Ola Adams, who is the defensive coordinator of Villanova, is being reported that he's going to be the co-DC, which everyone assumes, there's going to be another co-DC. No, it's usually just a title they kind of give them to get more money and more responsibility. But they introduce him as safeties coach and not defensive backs coach, which would lead me to believe that there will be a corners back coach like there has been at Temple for the past couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, I think to kind of go to your point of it, when they ask, well, how would you grade this? I mean, I like, as a Professor John, if I asked for a grade and 20% of my assignments weren't in yet, I think, it's incomplete, right? Especially with cornerbacks coach. Like, cornerbacks coach is arguably, like, historically, you need a recruiter there. You need a recruiter at the running backs position, you need a recruiter at the cornerbacks position. So I think the one thing, my takeaway from this class, or not this class, this coaching staff so far, is that I think everybody's a good recruiter at this point. I'm not sure if they have a dynamic recruiter yet. I think Preston Brown could be that, now that we actually get to see him on the field. But like, I think you really need to get somebody with high school connections that's proven it before, that they can get kids to Temple out of that cornerback spot. I mean, ideally, if you had infinite money, you would throw 7 figures at Fran Brown and say, come back and be cornerbacks coach, but that's not going to happen. So they need to find somebody with, historically, I mean, Corey Robinson, when Jeff Collins got him, was a good recruiter, came from Toledo. Melvin Rice was a pretty solid recruiter out in Chicago with corners back there. They need to bring another level of recruiting to this staff, I think, would be my biggest criticism.
Do you think, and again, they haven't, unless we've missed something, at least publicly, they have not named a recruiting coordinator yet. Do you think Chris Wiesahan fits that role? Do you think he becomes the O-line coach and the recruiting coordinator because of his body of work at Temple previously?
Yeah, and I think so. I mean, I think he understands what it takes to win at Temple and how to get kids at Temple. And Chris Wiesahan has, when he was here before, and even down Georgia Tech, has a good relationship with a lot of the suburban coaches. I mean, he was just 2 weeks ago recruiting a Syracuse transfer that was based out of Doylestown to commit to Georgia Tech. So, I mean, no, you told me downtown it was Doylestown.
Oh, okay.
Yes, because the kid committed to Georgia Tech and is there now. So like, he has a connection with there. I mean, I think it's either going to be him or Preston Brown, I think, unless somebody completely comes out of left field for one of these last 2 spots, because Preston Brown pretty much has a relationship with every high school coach in South Jersey, which obviously is an important part to Temple. So I would think it's one of those two. It kind of spitballing. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if Thad Ward could also do that job, because I mean, he's been here for 4 years now. He's always recruited like Virginia, DC, that area for Temple. So I think one of those 3 is probably the recruiter. I also don't think it's like a massive deal who has that title. Right. Everyone kind of just gets thrown in areas and you recruit from there.
So are we saying that grade wise, if we were to go around the horn here, that we'd have to give it an incomplete because it's not finished yet?
Going around the horn, I will give it an incomplete. If I was forced to grade it, I think it's a B right now. Those last 2 hires are really important to me. I think the Chris Wiesahan thing is a phenomenal hire. The fact that they managed to get him, regardless of the circumstances, whether or not that was him looking for a life vest from Georgia Tech or what, is that added a lot of credibility. Within 36 hours, they added Preston Brown and Chris Wiesahan to the staff, which pretty much silenced like any criticism about whether or not it's local staff and are they going to do things the right way, because those 2 were pretty much was on everybody's like rosterbation coaching staff, where they were like, how can I put together a coaching staff? Those 2 would have been on it.
Mm-hmm. Dante? Javon?
I think
go ahead, Javon.
Good, Dante.
All right. I'll take it, I guess. Yeah, it was cute. It was really cute. I'm with Kyle. I think this is an incomplete. I was kind of thinking about the staff. I think that they have a good mix of like local ties and experience, right? You look at the 2 presumptive primary coordinators in DJ Elliott and Danny Langsdorf. I think those 2 guys have a lot of Power 5 experience. They've had some levels of success at different programs. I think if you are Stan Drayton, a first-time head coach, you like that, and your two presumptive primary play callers. And then you look at the rest of the staff. I think, Ola Adams has some, local ties at the DC at Villanova. You look at Chris Wiesehan, you bring back Preston Brown. Thad Ward is also coming back. Like Kyle said, he's been recruiting here. So I think it's a good balance of experience and local ties. I think my biggest concern is less on the recruiting front and more about like cohesion. This is a group of people who have roughly never worked together in their lives. When it comes down to it, Stan Drayton has no experience with any of these people. And because we've been covering this coaching search, for the better part of a month or so, I've listened to a lot of coaches talk on YouTube and give interviews trying to, do research for different articles and stuff. Cohesion comes up a lot, especially with play callers and, DCs talking about their relationship with defensive backs coaches and linebacker coaches and, that stuff. So that stuff comes up a lot. That would be my biggest concern off the top. But I think if you're looking at it generally, I think you have a good mix of local ties and a good mix of experience, which you need for a first-time head coach. But like Kyle said, right, that last spot is important as a cornerbacks coach, right? You need to get somebody in there as a dynamic recruiter, as somebody who does scouting. Cornerbacks are interesting people typically, right? So it helps to have that type of coach bringing up that position group and recruiting this area.
Yeah, I think the cohesion part is really what I'm concerned with. I mean, we've all been the new guy at a job before, and it's like when it's you and 15 other new guys, it can go one or two ways. Either, okay, we're all cool because we're the new guys, or we're all out trying to get our own, and then it's just not a good, working unit. So that's one concern. But on the, guys they brought back, the Thad Wards and the Preston Browns, I was kind of shocked and a little worried about the status of Gabe Infante. I thought, that was a guy since November when we pretty much knew, Rod Carey wasn't going to be at Temple for much longer. I'm saying the next coach needs to move Gabe back to, linebackers coach and keep him around as a recruiter, because he just has so much ties in the city of Philadelphia for recruiting. And with him being off staff, that's probably the only decision that I can say I, effectively disagree with. But other than that, I mean, I'm with Kyle. Finish out the staff and then I'll have a full grade for you, because I mean, yeah, like you said, John, if I handed you some work that was 80% done, I mean, I'm not going to like the response I get from you for my final grade. So they finish that out, then I'll have more of a complete idea of how I feel about the staff as a whole.
So what we're saying is that Stan Drayton needs an extension.
Yeah, it sounds like, did he apply for one yet? Is the real question.
Sources close to the situation tell me that he has.
Okay,
So,
there we go.
There.
I will say people are, and Sam, I didn't mean to cut you off if you were going to start. I will say the one thing that kind of sticks out to me is there's a bunch of like good regional recruiters on the staff. I've yet to see like a true, like this guy recruits Philly really well. Like Chris Wiesehan's recruited Philly, but not full time. Ola Adams recruits Philly, but to like an FCS level. It'll be interesting to see if they can bring somebody in that's really like, nope, this guy's coming to Philly before and brought dudes out.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have done a tremendous job of just like not answering any of these questions.
I thought the first question was a grade.
First one was
wasn't
just about the grade.
Yeah.
Oh, we're just sticking with grade? Okay,
Look,
so
I'll start with saying I appreciate any question we get, but when I get these 5-tier questions, I'm like, I'm gonna spitball here. Like, I'm not gonna go line by line with these. It's usually just like, I get the general gist.
sure.
We'll talk about your topic.
So I would agree sort of with Kyle about like the B plus range. I mean, kind of everything I was going to say about the fact that Drayton hasn't worked with any of these guys. None of them have really worked together is probably the biggest concern. Yes, there's still picks to be made on filling out the rest of the staff, but I mean, most of what I was going to say has kind of already been said, that around that B plus range. I think there's a lot to be, if you're a Temple, there's a lot to be excited about, like within the staff. It's the product on the field. And I would agree with the whole, Weeze is the only rule guy. I would have expected maybe one or two more from former Temple, or like at least one other former Temple or from that era, maybe, but you have someone from that past Temple era. You're bringing Preston Brown, an on-field role, a guy that recruits well. So I think there's a lot of good minds in the building. The question is, how well do they work together and the product they put on the field?
As somebody that got degrees with B minuses, that a B minus is not a slight Okay, it's a passing grade. So Stan Drayton, you've passed so far.
I'll for whatever it's worth, I'll give him a B so far. What's the best hire?
I think it's Chris Weezy.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I think that was just like if I'm Chris Weezy, for everything we've been hearing, Chris Weezy has been trying to come back for a while, just in a number of different roles. I think it was from what you kind of heard from whispers down the lane, it was just seemed like he wanted to get back to Philadelphia. The fact that they took a ACC position coach and were able to come up with enough money, it sounds like he's getting a raise from this to bring him back as a position coach to an AAC school was impressive. And it doesn't hurt that he's a hell of a coach who's produced a lot of NFL linemen.
Yeah. Anybody else thoughts on best hire?
I think it was.
Go ahead, Javon.
I think Weeds is going to be the consensus, but I think Ola Adams deserves some consideration here too. Like I get it, Villanova's FCS level, but they're always a top 15, top 10 team in the FCS. So my thought process is if he could recruit Philly to the point that he had Nova, at that type of tier, that type of status, now he gets to go expand his horizons and recruit FBS talent. And I think that's something that you can't overlook. Like now he's got more of a better crop of talent to choose from. And now he can just point to, hey, look what I did with Villanova. Now you're coming to Temple with, more resources put into his football program than Villanova has. And you can really turn this thing into something special. So I think Ola Adams, if he's not 1B, he's a close second.
Mm-hmm. Sam?
I was just going to say if Weeds is 1A, then Preston Brown, I would say, is probably 1B. But, yeah.
Dante?
I don't really have anything to add. You guys took my stuff. I don't have anything to add there. I was going to say Ola Adams as well. I think, again, as a guy who does scouting, one of the few FCS teams that I find myself watching every year is Villanova. Typically, they have a couple of fringe pros every year, so it'll be good to see him get that bump to the FBS.
Yeah, I've never met the guy, but a couple of people I've talked to have said he's really, really impressive, really motivated. A guy that really, just nonstop learner about the game. He's been part of the NFL's minority internship program. He spent time with the Niners in 2014, the Bears in 2013, and was part of their coaching academy in 2013. And I agree with Javon. I'd like to see, if he was able to produce a lot of top 10 defenses at Villanova and get some fringe pros to Villanova. The question is, okay, what can he do with Temple at his back? I mean, Temple's not, Alabama by any means, but I thought that was a good local hire for them. And I'd have to go with Weezahan too. I think it was critically important for him to get somebody from, whatever you'd want to say, the Matt Rule era or the Al Golden era. And Weez is just one of those guys who really caught the bug when he came to Temple. I mean, he's got a ridiculously varied resume in that he's been all over the place. He's been with, he spent some time in the NFL with the Bucs. I mean, he's been at Purdue, he's been at Notre Dame, he's been at Buffalo, he was at JMU, he's with Syracuse, UCLA, Hawaii, all over the place. And anybody listening to this podcast, if they're even just a shred of a Temple fan, they know that he had a lot to do with Temple's success during Matt Rule's time here and Jeff Collins as well. It's obviously one of the reasons why Jeff brought him down to Georgia Tech. So, and that offensive line, as much as any position, and surely every position on that roster needs help, but boy, do they need help there. I mean, at that, we've talked before about, what do they have in Sam Davis? What do they have in Bryce Tolman? What do they have in Wisdom Quarshie? What do they have in Jim Tuobadegwu? I'll be interested to talk to Weez once he's looked at film and just ask him, like, what do you think of what you have? What do you think of where you have to plug in the holes? Because I think that could, it's not really rocket science to say, but based off of what he thinks he has there and what he can develop, does that make this a 3-year rebuild, a 2-year rebuild? I think that was a position where you really needed somebody. And I think that was a home run hire for him there. Who was the most unexpected?
Anybody? I did not expect either primary play caller, presumptively. I did not expect to hear DJ Elliott or Danny Langsdorff. Those were two names that came completely out of left field. I think I talked to, at least for me, I talked to it about it earlier. It's just that I think Stan really wanted experienced play callers, guys who have been around the block. There's nothing particularly exceptional about DJ Elliott's resume as a defensive coordinator. I think, Danny Langsdorf has coached some NFL quarterbacks. I think that's encouraging. He's worked with Eli Manning in the NFL. So he's got some things on his resume. It's like, okay, it makes sense that this would be an interesting OC hire. So those two names for me both came out of left field. And I've really had to do a lot of research on them because I was just not expecting them to be the hires at Temple of all places.
I'll echo that. I thought if you'd asked me a week ago who I thought the offensive coordinator was, I thought it was I had my eyes on a guy who's currently a position coach in the NFL. So Danny Langsdorf was nowhere on my resume. And then, like I said earlier, the fact that they were able to get Everett Withers on off the field role is surprising to me.
Javon, Sam, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I was gonna say Langsdorf too. That felt like an out of the blue name, but I would agree with Dante that you could throw DJ Elliott in that too.
Yeah, you can just put quotations around what Dante said and copy and paste it to me.
Javon is plagiarizing Dante's answer. Yeah, I would agree. I didn't have a really good read either way on who the coordinators were going to be. I think it does show that. Langsdorf, as Dante said, has put, he's worked with a lot of future pros. Elliott's intriguing. We'll get into that a little bit later in this next part of the question here in this 4-part detailed question here. And we won't have Dante give away the whole story here, but he did a great story on both coordinators and what you guys can expect from them in terms of philosophy. But I guess both of them were a surprise, but I can't say that I had like 5 guys lined up in my head and saying, if it's not going to be this guy, it's going to be that guy. But that fourth and final part here, can you do a brief preview of what we might expect philosophically on both sides of the ball? Dante, I'll start with you on this. You've X-noted this pretty well. If we were starting with Langsdorf, again, just looking at his body of work, which is pretty impressive, what would you expect, knowing that, again, we have to cover spring ball and he has to assess his personnel and all that stuff? Just a gut reaction, what would you expect philosophically? We'll start with offense and then look at the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, the offense is a little bit harder to get a grasp on. Langsdorf hasn't been a primary play caller since 2017. He's kind of bounced around as a quarterback's coach. So I didn't want to hold him too accountable to the schemes and production of the offenses that he wasn't calling plays for. So I used mostly numbers and the very limited film that I could find of his, 8-year run with Oregon State. And then his, I think, a 3-year run with Nebraska off the top of my head. So, looking at that, I think what the best way I would describe it, in the way I describe it in the article, without giving away the entire thing, is I think you're going to see a blend of a pro style and spread offense. You're going to see pro style concepts. The quarterback might take snaps from under center at Temple, which haven't seen that in a while. You might see that. I don't know how much that actually matters. Might be something that you see. It's a single back offense. You're not going to see 2 backs on the field at the same time at all. I know Temple tinkered with that a little bit. I'd be surprised if we see that from Langsdorf. And then, the spread concepts, this is still going to be a team that's going to try and stretch teams horizontally. So don't expect the bubble screens, the wide receiver screens on the perimeter, the quick outs, those very, very standard spread concepts are not going to be going anywhere. It's kind of a blend of those two. But if you listen to him talk, and really the way I wrote the article is just listening to him talk in different interviews that he's given and reading some of the things that he said over the years, he seems like a very adaptable coach. You go back to Oregon State, he had Sean Manny in there for a long time at quarterback. He ended up being their all-time passing leader. He adapted the offense. They threw the ball, close to 60% of the time in the mid-2000s, when that was a little bit, taboo for some of those teams to do that. Obviously, they did that in the Pac-12 because the Pac-12 is nuts, but, he was kind of the guy who really pioneered that, them in Washington State and Mike Leach and those guys. So, and then you go to his Nebraska tendencies. It's a lot of running the football, playing to that team's strength. They had a couple good backs there when he was there, shaky quarterback play. So again, I don't want to give everything away, but that's what I would expect from the offensive side of the ball. Again, just looking at the numbers, reading tea leaves from 5 years ago. He has not been a play caller in a good amount of time, but I think generally, right, the best way to describe it is it's a blend of pro style and spread concepts. And that's kind of, a little bit different from what we saw from the last staff. And it's not just going to be, spread him and shred him the entire time, unless he completely goes away from what he's done in the past.
Yeah. And again, we'll encourage you all sorry, Kyle, just real quick. We'll encourage you all to check out the stories that we'll have up on the site from Dante about, what you can expect from those guys. And again, schematically, what, Dante did a deep dive into both guys. Kyle, go ahead. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, I was just going to say, normally when you hire an offensive coordinator, you're kind of grasping, like when they hired David Patton, you were like, okay, well, let me look at FCS stats and all this. And at Northern. I mean, Mike Gurevich was kind of trailing off there beforehand. Langsdorf's produced some dudes in the past, like Brandon Cooks played for him. Amir Abdullah played for him. Like there's some names that have come out of his system that have made a lot of money in the NFL.
And then Dante, when we look at DJ Elliott, the thing that and you did a good job of explaining this in your story, is like the simulated simulated blitzes, the simulated pressures, and you did a great job of explaining that. Again, when you look back at him, sometimes the numbers don't always look great in some occasions, but the scheme looks intriguing, and you really equated it, again, without giving away the whole story, to some of the stuff that Temple's done in the past. But what do you think of, when you think of him? Again, the announcement on him hasn't been made official, but it's been reported in multiple places. What would, if Temple does ultimately have Elliott in that position, what would you expect philosophically on that side of the ball?
Yeah, I think, again, you have to really look past the numbers with Elliott. You just kind of have to accept the fact that Kansas is not going to be competing in the Big 12. They had a little bit of a better run this year, but not a good football team. So you have a lot of personnel deficiencies there. So looking at his scheme, again, you talked on the simulated pressures. Just generally speaking, a simulated pressure is you show that you're going to send extra players, right? So those are linebackers, safeties. And then the big difference, right? That's a normal blitz. The big difference with a simulated pressure is that you would drop a defensive lineman into coverage, and you would actually end up dropping 7 into coverage and still only rushing 4. And you would have a defensive lineman replace a linebacker or a safety at the second level. That's the simplest way to explain it. I have a video example in the article. Whenever he gets announced, I'm very excited to drop that. It'll be cool. So it'll be much easier to kind of see it and then read it. But that's the easiest way to do it. They did it a lot at Kansas. It's not like this completely new idea. It is overtaking the NFL. The Carolina Panthers are killing people with it right now. Phil Snow uses it. Mike Zimmer, a guy who's been around forever, is kind of the grandfather of that system. He did it at Dallas. He's done it at Minnesota to varying levels of success for years. That's kind of the guy who really got it going. So DJ Elliott uses that. You're going to see a position similar to the Bubo as well. They don't call it that, but they do kind of have an overhang linebacker, assuming he keeps the same scheme that he had at Kansas. That player is more of a primary coverage player with secondary pass rush responsibility. And then you have a stand-up edge rusher who's kind of the opposite. He's a primary pass rush player with some coverage responsibility. So looking back into Elliott, he's a linebackers coach. He's produced some NFL caliber linebackers in the past. Defense runs through the linebackers. All those guys need to be really good at pass coverage. All those guys need to be able to rush the passer and stop the run. They are going to make the defense go. And I think if you're a Temple fan, you look at the linebackers that you have, I think you probably consider that to be one of the strongest position groups on this team. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I think that's an advantage that they can lean into. Again, I don't want to spoil some of the stuff that he does with coverages and different pressures and whatnot that I covered in the story, but that's the gist of the simulated blitz. And again, the numbers from Kansas are not going to look pretty, but I think, this is a modern approach to defense at the end of the day. And that's kind of what I concluded going through it. So a name out of left field, but it'll be interesting to see what they've got. I think it meshes nicely with the strengths of the team. So I think that's about as good as a start as you can get without playing any ball.
Sam, Javon, anything you wanted to add on this?
I think the only thing I would add, everyone knows professionally I'm a Ravens fan, and Wink Martindale loves the simulated pressures. So I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. The only thing I will say is falling in love with that scheme can become a little dangerous if you don't have the players that fit it. Like, you can find yourself taking a dominant edge rusher out of his best position to succeed by dropping him out in coverage, because that's what your scheme calls for. And, saw Matt Judon leave the Ravens for the Patriots for that very reason. And college route is completely different. But and there's not really any gifted and super talented edge rushers on the Temple roster right now, but down the line, if they get one of those guys, that'd be the only thing I look out for, is if he's taking that guy out of the best position for him to succeed and dropping him back into coverage, because that's what his scheme calls for, instead of going off of what the player does best.
That last comment, actually, I think is really interesting. I think you've seen the good and the bad of that at Temple. Yeah. You saw 2016, Phil Snow won a conference championship because they dropped Hassan Reddick a lot of times into coverage. But Hassan Reddick is also a once-in-a-generation athletic freak. you saw the bad part of that when 12 years ago when Adrian Robinson, his last year under Golden, they tried dropping him into coverage a lot. He's out of place. The next year, Steve Adazio comes in for all of his slights, all of his flaws, just says, why would we take our best pass rusher and not have him pass rush? Yep. And then he goes and wins the Mid-American Defensive Player of the Year award, I believe.
Yeah. Had a brief stay in the NFL and, of course, passed away several years ago. But some interesting stuff. And again, this is why once these guys get introduced and then you cover spring ball, it's really fun to ask them about this stuff. And then you kind of find out where they're starting to fall in on, like, I like some parts of my scheme, but, I'm going to try to blend it around what we have here so far. But I think that's an interesting point, is that, I'm not saying that the linebackers that Temple has are, 5 or 6 all league guys, but I think we can agree with all the struggles they had last season and certainly this season, you do, see some bright spots there so far. We've covered most of the staff, and we'll talk about them a little bit later, but a couple names that we didn't mention. We talked a little bit about Preston Brown. Again, he's going to be remaining. Again, it hasn't been officially announced yet, but we broke the news that he's going to be back on the field as running backs coach. Tori Tackle is their director of football operations. She had actually come in she had spent some time previously at Texas, so Stan knows her from there. Adam Shire, interesting hire there, tight ends and special teams coach out of Rutgers. Kyle, you had heard, I don't know if it had been reported or you'd heard that he was maybe going to get moved off the field, but Rutgers special teams units were playing, pretty well.
Right. I mean, this is going to sound almost like I'm defending Rod Carey. I'm most certainly not. But like Greg Schiano is essentially coming to the same conclusion that Rod Carey came in 2 or 3 years ago, which is in today's college football, when you're allowed 10 coaches on the field, a lot of programs are realizing, like, I can't waste one of these spots entirely on a special teams coordinator. Like, you can do that from off the field, and I can get a recruiter out there that can recruit. So from what I'm hearing, I think Schiano was planning on going that route, for pushing him off the field and then filling that 10 spot with another position coach. Unfortunately, though, they already have a tight ends coach in Nunzio Campanale, so it was not possible at Rutgers. But at Temple, he can stay on the field because he can also coach tight ends.
Yeah. Any other staff names here again that jump out? Any stuff that you guys wanted to add, or any thoughts on? Again, I should mention that Chris Fenelon is going to be the strength coach, was the assistant strength coach at Ohio State. That's a very important hire. Where the truth lies on a lot of the Iverson Clement stuff and some of the stuff that he alleged against Brad Orr. Even apart from that, you could look at the performance of the team. Granted, it happened during COVID. They go 1-6 last year, and then 3-9 this season. And the line didn't perform well. I think, I don't know, had Rod Carey stuck around any scenario, I think you could have looked at things and said maybe they need new strength coach in here. So that's obviously a very important hire. Comes in with a pretty good resume, a younger guy. Graduated, and I forget where he played and graduated in 2013 from I forget where, but has played the game and was the assistant strength coach at Ohio State. So
it's Stony Brook.
That's right. So
he's a Mickey Marotti guy who's kind of like the Ohio State, like, legendary. Yep. Has survived however many coaching changes. Strength.
Yeah. So not a bad lineage to have there. Again, we'll keep you updated on any of those 2 remaining spots, where that 10th job goes. We'll see. It will be interesting to see if it is a cornerbacks coach, where that where Stan Drayton will reach out to on that. We've got a ton of mailbag questions here, a lot of basketball stuff as well, and some football stuff. We could start we could go basketball here, we could go football, but we've got a very, very full mailbag, having been off for 2 weeks. So really appreciate you guys getting in as many questions as possible. We'll start with some of the basketball stuff. Again, these are questions from our owlscoop.com subscribers. Appreciate the questions. First one here comes from Diamond and Broad. And the question is, for whatever reason, the basketball program lacks juice and has lacked juice for at least the past 6 to 8 years. Is it too soon to start to question if Aaron McKie can get it done? I know COVID and other factors have definitely hurt, but there does not seem to be significant improvement. Also, would love for you to talk about why each of you think McKie and the program have struggled and how they can turn it around. Thanks as always. Hope everyone had a great holiday. Sam, what do you think?
I think that we also think that Diamond and Broad had a great holiday. Um, but to answer the question, I mean, to the second part of the question, I think is the one I think we should spend more time on. Like you can only give so much weight to like the lack of practice time, and COVID really hit Temple pretty hard. And I don't want to give too much weight to injuries because like every college program, every program in the country has to deal with something like that. But it's been a real tough spot for Temple. A lot of their offense relies on misdirection actions, creating, drawing attention, and then like skip passes, as Aaron McKee always says, playing inside out. Like he wants to make defenses collapse and then find open guys. They have guys on the floor that they've had guys that can shoot, and they've had guys that really can't shoot. Like Jaleel White is very frequently wide open in the corner, which is the spot that they want when they attack the middle. They want to find the guy open in the corner of the wing, but Jaleel White's not that guy. He's been a great defender for them. His offensive game in terms of like attacking the rim is improved, but that's a big part of their offense is to draw attention, to find open guys. So having lost Caleb Battle, having dealt with Ty Strickland being in and out, having Dame Dunn out for half the season last year, like they're dealing with primary scorers being out, having to adjust. So you're throwing more guys into the fire. Last year it was Jeremiah Williams getting thrown into the fire. Caleb Battle's getting thrown into the fire. These are new guys to the program. Now Zach Hicks is in a similar spot where he's seeing increased minutes as a true freshman, and Hysier Miller also getting thrown into the fire. So again, I don't want to give too much weight to the injuries, but like that's really hurt them, is that they rely so heavily on guard play. And it's been almost a revolving door the last 2 years when Jeremiah Williams is the only player to play in every single game.
Let me ask you this question. I want to throw this out to you and to Javon as well. You mentioned that Aaron says, I want to play. We've talked about this offline too. I think there are a couple of things that, for whatever it's worth, are going to start to wear a little bit. After that UCF game, Aaron said, and again, I'm paraphrasing here. Well, we got to get older. I'm playing with some babies out there. And he talked about the portal. Well, he has access to the same portal that everybody else has access to. And that portal has netted him Emmanuel Akpomo, who, as I understand it, has a neck injury. I don't know when he's going to be back. So, we knew that him coming in from Wake, he was raw, defense is ahead of his offense type of guy, limited body of work on him, and he has been out. He talks about the portal, and I think there's a mailbag question in here later on. We can dive more into this. You're not getting much out of Sage Tolbert. He's coming off the bench now. Not to say that him being relegated to the bench means he's terrible, but it says something about his performance. But Aaron keeps talking about, I need to play inside out. They can't play inside out right now. Jake Forrester has not shown us that he's gotten any better as a passer. And so I wanted to ask you about that. When he talks about playing inside out, what can you do when you're not, Jake hasn't gotten any better in terms of passing out of double teams, and it just doesn't seem to have that awareness, and it's not clicking. So what do you think of when you hear him say, we want to play inside out? And do you want to say to him, I don't know if you have the personnel to do it right now?
Yeah, so we've talked about this before. The way to play inside out is to get paint touches, whether that's getting the ball inside, and you need a big man that the defense is willing to bring a second defender and then kick back out, or you want a guy who can dribble, drive, draw that kind of attention, and then kick back out. And a lot of their offense is predicated on getting their primary scorers in open spots. And then if defenses kind of collapse or if guys rotate, then you can kind of find open guys off that. And I think a lot of Temple's most successful basketball has been when their second, third, or fourth scoring option is the one that's really producing. They were good. Like Caleb Battle wasn't going to drop 20 a game. He had 4 against Clemson. Like there were going to be nights where he couldn't do that. When he couldn't do that, Damian Dunn had to be that guy. And then, look at Delaware State. Zach Hicks hit 10 threes. He was the one that really carried them. And Aaron McKee talks about making adjustments to the feel of the game. After the St. Joe's game, this is the Aaron McKee quote that really sticks out to me so far this season. I asked him about, when they run that diamond set and Damian Dunn comes off looking like on the wing, and they deny the passing lane when they front Damian Dunn and deny the passing lane, the offense kind of just fell apart. And this was one game. They've played 13 games this season. This is one game, one instance. But when they deny the passing lane there, the offense kind of just falls apart. What happens then? And Aaron McKee said the problem is that And this happens. The problem is that when defenses take away their first option and sometimes their second option, they just kind of get spooked. And they don't really like the offense just falls apart. And that's the biggest thing they need to learn and they need to grow. If this team, which he has called, a group of babies, like he's coaching like a lot of young guys who haven't played a whole lot of basketball together. That's their biggest thing is they need to be able to find ways for second, third, fourth, fifth options to be able to put the ball in the hoop. So when you don't have a guy like Jake in the middle of the floor who can put the ball in the hoop, if Nick Jourdain isn't necessarily like a post player, but he's a guy that can get you a couple points, like you need other options when things aren't always going for your number one scoring option.
Javon, to go off of this and just kind of stay in line with this question, I want to tweak it a little bit. What do you think of when you see, and maybe we'll save some Sage Tolbert conversation for later on the mailbag, but what do you think is not clicking with Jake Forrester right now in terms of them not just being able to play inside out, but just him being inconsistent is nothing that we haven't seen before. And we had Jimmy Fennerty on our podcast before, and he was pretty optimistic about him heading into the season. And he's been injured. He's had an injury, but what do you think is not firing for him right now when you look at him play?
Well, for Jake Forrester, there's a multitude of things. Number one, he's not the most coordinated guy in the world. You can't be a good post scorer if you're not coordinated. It can't work. It's literally impossible. And then, size wise, he's not the strongest dude in the world either. Like he's got decent sized shoulders, but he doesn't know how to use them to shield defenders off. He doesn't have the best touch in the world. He's right-handed, but every time I see him attempt a hook, it seems like he's always using his left hand, but he has no touch with his left. So it seems like defenders know, force him to his left hand, box him out, grab the rebound, and you're gone. So he doesn't have touch. He's not coordinated. He doesn't have any special footwork. Like, have we seen Jake Forrester perform a post move other than a drop step this season? Like, have we seen him do up and under at all? The simple things? And I can't remember seeing any. So, the post moves aren't there. The strength isn't there. Not the most coordinated guy, and he doesn't have any touch. Like, he puts in effort on the defensive end. I'll give him that. But offensively, for a team that wants to run an inside-out system, you need a big man that's at least respectable, a big man that has at least a jump hook that can get you 8 to 10 points a game. And Jake Forrester just doesn't have that. The problem for Temple is there's no one else on the team that can provide that either. Sage Tolbert, maybe, but you look at his size, he's not a center. I've said this before, he's got the lack of skill of a center, but he's the size of a small forward. Nick Jourdain, way better when you can play him on the perimeter than play him down low. Erasmus Parks, and this isn't even, cracking a joke. The dude really has 1.5 knees. Like, you look at him move, you can tell, what is it, his right knee that he wears the brace on or his left knee? Like, that thing is deteriorated. So, and then Emmanuel Promo, like I said, I saw him in high school and he was at Oak Hill. Hasn't developed much since then. I know he's got the neck injury right now, but when he comes back, he hasn't played enough basketball to be able to stay in shape. Every time we see him come in, the once every 5 or 7 games that he does play, he's gassed after 5 minutes. He's not a guy with the most touch in the world either, but at least he's got some athleticism to him where it's to the point where if he can set some solid screens, he can be a lob threat on the pick and roll. But who else besides Jeremiah Williams do we trust to throw that lob pass at the rim? So there's just a multitude of factors for Temple where it's just at that 5 position, they just don't have what they need in order to run the system that they want to run. I think Aaron McKee is going to have to get out of his ways and kind of turn this Temple team into some modern basketball that stretches it out more. And I know this team, you don't want them jacking up threes because what are they? Like low 30s, high 20s in percentage, from beyond the arc. But this team, you have to consider maybe you do start Nick Jourdain at the 5 and Zach Hicks, Jeremiah Williams, Damian Dunn, and you choose who else you want after that. Maybe it's Jalil White for some defensive purposes and some athleticism on the wing. But they just don't have what it takes to be a dominant inside team right now.
I have 2 things I want to jump in on. One, the thing about Sage and Nick is they're both like face-up 4s. like Sage's best basketball and is when he's being aggressive on the glass. I think Kyle pointed out after 2 games, he played 50 minutes and didn't score a single basket. Like he's a face-up 4, and he had one of those, like he's had like 2 or 3 putback dunks like on top of someone, and that's his best game is when he plays physical. Nick Jourdain can be a good stretch 4. Javon, I'll be honest, I think it's unfair to say Jake has no touch. We've seen him drop 20 too many times to say he has no touch around the rim. I'm not going to
left hand is what I'm saying. The left hand, the touch isn't there. The right hand, when he can get to his right hand, Jake Forster can score. But when
he's dropped 20 points one time.
Yeah, really?
One time in his career.
One time, yeah. But when that right hand gets shut down and he's forced to use his left, then you're seeing, the touch isn't really there.
Sure. And I'm not going to defend him. I think he's a lot to grow. And like, as John has mentioned before, his development as an interior scorer is going to do so much for them with the ability to play inside out. But yeah, they don't have a true 5 that can do that. But when he missed the Houston game because of a non-COVID related illness, like their offense looked pretty solid with the lineup of Jeremiah, Dame, Jaleel White, Nick Jourdain, and I think it was Sage, maybe. Like when they played like that smaller ball lineup, when small ball is like 6'5" to 6'8".
With Hiroshima, yeah, we talked about that a little bit. We were talking about the other night. Even like, I'm not. What we know that Hiroshima Parks has his limitations, but he was not afraid to be physical, which I thought was a little intriguing. I'm not saying start Hiroshima Parks, but I don't know.
I think they have some really, really promising, talented pieces, but they're a year or 2 away. They're a couple pieces away from being kind of like what Aaron really envisions. I think like they have. Go ahead, Kyle.
No. By all means, finish your statement.
I was just gonna kind of say the same thing about like that. Like they're a couple pieces away, and that comes through either the transfer portal or whether they're recruiting a big or whatever, because they have a pretty deep backcourt.
Back to the initial question where they said they don't think they've improved. I disagree. I think they're a better team this year than they were last year. They've gotten better. Scoring average has gone up. Scoring points allowed has gone down. Damian Dunn is a significantly better player this year than he was last year. Last year he was shooting 30%. Now he's up to 40. He's getting better in every aspect. You're seeing the growth there that you like. And you can see some things that they've improved upon. They went from a bottom 3rd offensive rebounding team to now they're like the number 29 team in the nation on offensive rebounds. So they've focused on some things. It helps when you're rolling out Jaleel White, who's long and tall, and you start line up with things like that. But I think that they are a better team than they were last year. I don't think they're as good of a team this year as I thought they were going to be, but they're still an improved team. So I still see steps. I still see progress.
We actually got a ton of basketball questions to get to for all the additions on the football staff. So we'll try to rifle through these as quickly as we can. Park Al has the next question. Since Caleb Battle's injury, this team has taken on the gritty, grinded out squad with no clear-cut number 1 scorer persona with mixed results. Other than Dunn, who's most likely to step up into that number 1 scorer role by the end of this season?
I mean, I think Damian Dunn has become that primary scoring role, whether or not, he's had nights where he's dropped as little as 10, I think, against UCF or 12. And he's had, a night where he dropped 27 against Penn, but he's their primary go-to scorer. The question is that now without Caleb Battle in the rotation, it's easier to game plan for only having to deal with Damian Dunn instead of both Caleb Battle and Damian Dunn and Jeremiah Williams on the floor. But second scorer, I think that Jeremiah is averaging high 9 per game. I think he's definitely a guy that his scoring totals are going up, and Nick Jourdain's probably my dark horse.
Yeah, I'd agree with
Go ahead, Joan.
I'd agree with the Nick Jourdain as a dark horse. I think, we saw Zach Hicks with the 10 threes against Delaware State. Granted, it's Delaware State, but you got to find ways to get the young guy more involved in the offense. This is the guy everyone in the building is saying he's got potential to be, the next upper echelon Temple player. You got to start treating him like it. You got to start getting him his touches and creating more opportunities for him to grow into that. But I also look at a guy like Ty Strickland, who I look at Ty Strickland this season and his role, it feels like a 07-08 Tony Parker role to me. And the standpoint of this, Sam, those Spurs
No, it's
teams,
just a funny comparison.
Yeah, and those Spurs teams, like we knew Tony Parker could give you 20 and 12, and that's fine and dandy. But when the Spurs were at their best and most lethal was when that 20 and 12 got cut down to 25 and 7. Now, Ty Strickland doesn't start. he's not going to get anywhere closer to 20-something points. But I mean, from the standpoint of if he can scale back from being a facilitator off the bench to being go ahead and focus more on scoring, because we saw him at the beginning of the season. Ty Strickland's shoulder is healthy, and he can operate from the mid-range like anyone else on that team. I think him, Damian
Ty's
Dunn,
great. He just hasn't played a lot.
Yeah,
He's just dealt with injuries.
Yeah, if he can stay healthy and stay in the lineup, and it's a lot of pick and roll and let him kill from 18 feet, and then I think that's the next guy like who can be Dunn's number 2. So if he can, when he's in the lineup and he's healthy, become less of a facilitator and more of a scorer, I'd put some of that responsibility on him.
And of course, Ty did not make the trip down to Orlando to play at UCF. He's been dealing with a back injury. That's kind of like a day-to-day situation. We'll see how that goes.
I think Jeremiah Williams is their steady Eddie. Very bad start to the season. He hit one of his first 11 free throws. Since then, he's like an 11-point-a-game guy. I think he's righted his ship, and he's exactly what they need as number 2 or number 3 scorer.
Yeah. It's just about hitting open catch and shoot shots for Jay Will at this point, because that's the one shot where he's getting them, but they're not falling consistently.
I think you could say that about most Temple Owls.
Yeah, and that's really a problem. Like, as a D1 basketball player, that's supposed to be the one thing you absolutely can do is hit an open shot. Like, that's what high school coaches preach the most, and that's kind of not the case right now for Temple, which is concerning to say the least.
Next couple questions here, we'll kind of blend them together. So this John Rothstein thing picked up a little bit of traction on social media, and I engaged with them. Kevin Gandhi engaged with them. Not that Rothstein got back to me, not that I ever thought he would, because he doesn't seem to. But anyway, here are the two Rothstein related questions that we got from our message board. This first one's from Temple J. It has been mentioned in this forum and by John Rothstein that the men's basketball staff is of the opinion that Temple should move to the A10. Okay, that's just to cut in there. John Rothstein, I don't think has ever said that the Temple basketball staff thinks that they should move to the A10, but that's what he has suggested ad nauseum. It gets exhausting. Any insight there? If true, I'm disappointed that 1, they think it, and that's short-sighted, and 2, they allow it to be reported. And then the other question here from the screen name is Al to the 8th degree, we call him. What's really going on with John Rothstein, and do you think our admins are seeing it at this point? And what do you make of Kevin Gandhi feeling like he needed to say something instead of just letting it go like you would 99% of the time? It takes a lot to get Kevin Gandhi to come after you. I'll talk about that real quick. Kevin and I have been friends for more than 20 years. We were texting back and forth about this. Kevin felt like engaging with him because, he felt like engaging with him and felt like John was way off base. So Kevin is a pretty, mild-mannered guy, but I wouldn't say that if Kevin gets involved, it's a super serious thing. I think Kevin feels the way that I feel, which is, before we get to that, I'll say, I don't think, Jeff Goodman put a tweet out there saying that I think that essentially saying, I think that the Temple staff wanted this to happen. I've checked around on this and talked to people about this. I don't think that's the case. If John Rothstein got that impression, he might be wrong. Could there, and again, this is total speculation. Could there have been a time 2 or 3 years ago where someone had said to him, I don't know what's going to happen with the American and conference realignment, maybe, but I would not be surprised if they've reached out to him and said, look, dude, cut it out, because this is, they know, and Sam can vouch for this. And, those guys know that they need to essentially try to aspire to be, and stay with me when I say this, like they need to aspire to be like a program like Gonzaga. Not going to happen overnight, may never happen. You have to be the best team you can be in what could eventually be a 2 or 3 bid league. Once Cincy leaves, once Houston leaves, once UCF leaves. But they know that going to the A10 doesn't make sense. And I don't think that anybody recently has been fueling John Rothstein and saying, put that out there. And but it's John. I can't say I've ever met the guy before. It's just him doing what he does best, which is just putting the same, evergreen 8 or 9 or 10 tweets out there. And this just seems to be his thing. Going to the A10 would not make sense. I think we've talked about this on this pod before. There are no natural rivalries there. The only ones that you do have are ones that you have already through the Big Five. But I would get the sense in telling you guys that I think that everyone on the staff is, if they haven't reached out at some point, I wouldn't be surprised if they reached out and said, John, ain't happening, dude. It's kind of nauseating. It's just, I've never met the guy. Sam, this is for you. He could be the nicest guy in the world. I've never actually met John, but it's a dumb, uninformed shtick at this point. And I'll get out of the way and let you guys, jump in on this if you have anything else to say.
I don't care about the Temple thing. Like, he can voice whatever opinion he wants to have about that. I think it's stupid, but he can do whatever he wants. Once you decide to become a character who thinks that he's bigger than the story, where you're selling merchandise based upon the things that you tweet, and you're taking limelight away from kids that have already announced their commitment, and you're saying per sources this kid committed there. Yep. You've made your bed at this point. I think he's kind of, initially I thought he was kind of trolling the world, to be honest. I thought that he realized that this is ridiculous and that's why he keeps saying these things. In reality, I don't think that he realizes that he's become the joke. Don't have much respect for people like that, to be quite frank.
You say you want to fire him into the sun? What if he was
back in?
What if he was at half court and there was a fire?
Which was our Javon. I don't know. Were you on the pod when we had that mailbag question? It was somebody said it was just some crazy question. It was like, if he was on fire at half court, would you save him? And I think I said yes.
I don't think I was on for that episode.
I'm not a terrible human being, but I don't know.
There are too many people in this industry that have decided to make the story about them. Yeah. And he is one of those people. It's hard for me for people to come back from things like that. Hashtag you are not the story.
John Rothstein, the Baseball Writers of America, and whoever the voter who said he won't give Aaron Rodgers an MVP vote. The guys like that, just it's not about you. Now, granted, Aaron Rodgers won't get my MVP vote, but still, like, the reasons he has is just ridiculous. No, I'd say with Rothstein, look, I think right now, and then especially when, the Big 12 teams leave, yes, the A-10 better basketball conference than the American. And I've got no gripe with saying that. I mean, I look at Richmond, VCU, Davidson, the list goes on and on about how much better the A-10 is than the American at basketball, at least in my opinion. However, college sports have become so much about money. Temple makes what, $12 million a year off of the ESPN TV deal?
More like
the American
seven-ish, right? Seven
or something.
Yeah.
It's supposed to go up to double digits eventually, if I remember correctly. Still, you don't turn down that type of money to go to the A-10 when you are a school that wants to take football seriously. So what, you're going to go independent? Yeah, how's that worked for UMass and UConn? Mm-hmm. It hasn't worked at all, okay? Mm-hmm. Now, maybe you can be Army, but no, you don't have the brand that Army does. So you're turning down money, you're abandoning football. It's just not how college sports works now. Rothstein is he's become like a robot who's just programmed to annoy the Philadelphia, Temple fan base at this point. I don't have much nice to say about it. If it could just stop, it'd be wonderful. But no, it just ethically, financially, none of it makes sense. And I would hope no one on the basketball staff is leaking anything to him or just asking him to push this agenda out.
I've asked around on that. I do not think that's the case. Just to circle back on this real quick, again, the tweet that he had was making mention of the fact that the Houston game was poorly attended. I'm not going to argue that in the interest of fairness, but he used it as an opportunity to go in on his normal shtick. And I'd be a hypocrite. Look, I mean, that when they played UCF at home before the break, that was one of the lightest attended Temple games I've seen in a long time. So is attendance at a great spot? No, it absolutely isn't. It's a combination of things. The students haven't been interested. For the Houston game, people were home. You're not gonna get any argument from me that the game was lightly attended, to be kind, but he just uses it as an opportunity to kind of just go in on the same thing on and on.
It's also not like Temple's the only program in the country that with a COVID surge, in a city with a COVID surge and all of its students home for break, didn't have anybody in the stands.
Right.
It's like you can't just keep blaming a school trying to give its football team some spotlight as the reason the basketball team isn't good. Like, no, we've got to be honest. Aaron McKee, we love the guy, but you got to recruit better. You got to coach better. You can't, you're going to put that on the football team? Mm-hmm. No, that's not how it works. So you just got to stop. And I mean, come on, me and Sam, basketball always comes first for us, just as, consumers of sports. But like, you can't blame football here. It's just not how it works. So
Somewhere along the way, somebody convinced John Rothstein that you can't be good at football and at basketball. Never mind the fact that Baylor exists. Like, you can be good at both.
Michigan State. There are a ton of examples.
Michigan.
So, Michigan. Final Rothstein question here. This one's comes from the screen name. What to you? If you could tell John Rothstein to tweet out one thing about Temple, what would it be?
That's a great question.
Due to recent tweets, I have been banned from the city of Philadelphia, where Temple resides. If you could just tweet that out, that would be great. Actually, no. I'm close to just like muting him and moving on, because he just fills me with
Kyle's mantra, MAMO, mute and move on.
He fills me with
I'd
anger.
probably have him tweet "I love Kyle Gauss."
Good. Come follow me.
With like a little heart emoji.
Send that follow my way.
Dante, Javon, anything? If you could tell John Rothstein to tweet out one thing about Temple, any wish list items there? No.
I think I've got my opinion on cheesesteaks on Temple's campus is god awful. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Was it Plaza? He liked Plaza.
It's something like that.
Yeah, the now defunct Plaza Pizza, right?
Yeah,
Technically, Max's is on the health science campus. That's where you should be going for.
Yes. Yeah. He said something about like Plaza Pizza having a great. I was like, come on.
I would like him to tweet nothing about Temple. That would be my wish, is that he just never tweets about Temple again. I am tired of talking about this. I'm tired of seeing it. It's ridiculous. And I'm not even like directly involved in the discourse, because I very much stick to my football slant as much as possible. But even I am getting incredibly annoyed with this national writer's weird fixation on a mid-level basketball program.
Yeah, I'll make this
like, it's very odd. It's such a weird slant. Why are you picking this hill of all the hills of college basketball to die on?
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand.
Next mailbag question here comes from the screen name Fig1. I'm certain our new president and athletic director are focused on fixing the football program right now, but when does that focus switch to basketball? In other words, is the current coaching staff on the quote unquote hot seat, or do you think they still have rope extending to them? I'll say one thing and then I'll get out of the way and throw this over to you guys. I don't, there's this perception sometimes, I think, yes, they had to hire a new football coach, but I don't think they just say we're only focusing on football now, we're not focusing on basketball. But I don't know. Is this staff on the hot seat? I'll throw this over to you guys.
No, I don't believe so.
Yeah,
I think next year is the make or break year for them.
Mm-hmm.
I would second. I mean, we talked about how like Rod Carey's third year was like kind of an inflection point for him. I think there was probably a similar conversation with Aaron McKee and the Temple basketball program. Kyle mentioned it before. They've seen improvement. They've dealt with COVID in a way that's not been horrible. So them moving in the right direction, I think is a good sign. There's no shot they're on the hot seat.
Next question here comes from the screen name TU1834. I don't remember if it was in interviews with coaches or just from general talk on the podcast, but Sage Tolbert has been brought up as someone who could be our answer to what Houston does. I believe he's been compared to Gorham specifically. Now that we've seen him play against Houston, what is everyone's overall impression of him as a player? I'll hang up and listen, but my impression is that while I thought he played okay on Sunday, he hasn't lived up to expectations and has lost a starting spot, which is concerning.
I'm going to read something to you. You tell me what you think it is. 3 points, 2.5 rebounds, 34% from the field, 36% from three.
Is it Sage Tolbert's stat line?
That's Justin Gorham's stat line from his first year at Houston. We're envisioning by all means, I don't think Sage Tolbert is Justin Gorham, but like we're remembering senior year Justin Gorham, not junior year Justin Gorham, who is doing exactly what Sage Tolbert's doing right now.
Good pick out.
That's all I'll contribute to that.
Nice job, Kyle.
Sam, I don't think he's Justin Gorham.
Sam, you had something to say, but looked like that stumped you.
No, I don't know. That was good. I don't have anything. Yeah. I think Sage Tolbert.
Justin Gorham from where? Where is he from?
Downingtown. No, I have no idea.
Somebody on this Zoom right now should be excited about that. He's from Baltimore. He's a Calvert Hall kid.
Oh, well, Calvert Hall. I mean, yeah, it counts.
He's from. Yeah,
it counts. Yeah, no. Only thing I'd say about Sage Tolbert is he has to show that he was worthy of transferring up from Southeast Missouri. That's it. Right now, it doesn't look like it, but like Kyle said, Justin Gorham wasn't great his first season at Houston, and Sage Tolbert hasn't been great his first season at Temple. But he is one of those guys who, after each game, we see him on the court putting in some extra work. So, hopefully, it pays out for him, and next season, he becomes a very key contributor on the team.
Yeah, Sage has been okay. I would agree that he hasn't totally lived up to expectations, like 13 games into his Temple career, but his peak is as a really strong offensive rebounder and rim runner.
Yeah. Next question here from the screen name is Tiger Owl. What has surprised you, good or bad, about hoops this season so far?
The way their offense has handled life without Caleb Battle. I think a lot of people expected them to just fall apart at the heels. Granted, they had 2 games in a row where they didn't score 50 points, but like there's a difference in putting the ball in the hoop and creating those shot opportunities. There was a stretch where they just weren't hitting shots. I think the way their offenses responded to life without Caleb Battle, in terms of the flow of the offense and able to get looks, I think has been impressive.
Yeah, I have to ask the question. Sam, was Donahue right about the offense looking like it flows more naturally without Caleb Battle?
I think I would agree that it flows more naturally, but it's different because when you have a player like of that caliber shooting 50+% from 3, like that's something you want, and they can rely on that, and that's something that's a luxury. They have to have more flow when you're sharing the ball a lot more.
Yeah,
Caleb Battle was in the conversation for best guard in the city prior to getting injured. So like, yeah, I think it's impressive that they've kind of kept the ship afloat since then, but like, no coach is gonna be like, yeah, I'm glad I lost Caleb Battle.
Right.
Yeah, Kendrick Davis is the best guard in the American right now, and Caleb Battle was scoring more points than him and arguably playing as well, if not better than him.
A few more questions to get through here, and again, we appreciate them. A lot of questions to get through this week. Next one is from the screen name Malenko. I know the staff is still being announced, but are there any updates? And again, this is pertaining to football. Are there any updates around recruiting, comments on players Temple has recently offered a guess as to how many sign on February 15th, any transfers coming in or leaving for the start of the semester? I mean, we can tell you just recently as we sat down to record this, Jacob Porter, a weak side defensive end out at North Allegheny High School in Wexford, which is about 20 minutes outside of Pittsburgh. Temple just offered him, not projected to be the player that his father, Joey Porter, was, or Joey Porter Jr., his brother at Penn State. But Temple has offered him, got a scouting report from a buddy of mine out in Pittsburgh who knows that area. And, he said he can develop into his brother's an NFL prospect and plays a premium position. He can develop into that, but he isn't there yet and isn't the freak athlete that his brother is. Might explain why he's still out there and available, but it's a recent guy they have offered. They've had a few other guys that they've reached out to that are grad transfers. We're trying to look into a couple of others. I mean, as to how many guys they might bring in on the 15th, Kyle, I don't know. What are we thinking here? Maybe another 6-7 guys, maybe.
I think honestly, you're probably looking at closer to 10. I think you're primarily, this is completely unsourced. This is me kind of guessing, to be honest. There's 10 open scholarships at this point. That includes, that doesn't include if Khalif Kemp signs, which Bella reported today that he's planning to. I don't know if Temple's planning on him signing, is usually the other part of that equation. But for all I know, he is. So let's include those 10. I think you get closer to 10. I think it's going to be primarily high school kids. And I think if you're a new coach entering a situation like this, I tend to think that conservatively you might go, okay, well, let me see what I have first before going into the transfer portal. I don't know these kids yet. Let me see what we go through with spring, and then we can kind of bring in during the summer to supplement. I think they're definitely going to try to bring in a quarterback, whether that's a transfer or a high school kid. I think they're going to bring a running back, and then you kind of just do best availables from there. So I would say probably closer to 10.
Forgot about it. If you haven't checked out Caden Steele's story on Elijah Warner, the son of Kurt Warner, who has a movie that just dropped. Kurt Warner, not Elijah Warner. Again, I mean, there are some names out there. It'll be interesting to see how they flesh out the rest of that class. A couple more to get through here. SoCal Al is the screen name on this one. Although early in the new administration, you get vibes about an on-campus stadium. No, not yet. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but I think they got to take one step at a time here. Haven't heard anything definitive either way about an on-campus stadium. Next question, screen name is C. Coyer. When do you think you might be able to get a Drayton interview on the podcast? Working on it. Probably will not happen until after Stan gets his staff solidified and after signing day. So maybe hoping to get him on the pod, maybe mid to late February might be a possibility. Certainly would love to get him on as a guest. So we're working on it. The last question here we'll finish off with is the screen name is Phi Cap Al 3. Kind of in line with this, would love to hear your overall impression on the state of Temple athletics as it relates to financial investments. With the women's volleyball hire, the highly experienced football staff hires, and Eden Carey's contract, it seems like we're really opening up the checkbook and investing in our athletics programs. Do you get the impression that President Wingard is going, quote unquote, all in on athletics? What do you guys think? Kyle?
The first part of that is interesting to me. Phi Kappa Al is not the first person to mention this, but the hiring of Linda Hampton Keith to me doesn't mean anything about Temple's financial investment. She was out of a job. Like, she was an unemployed coach who got a head coaching job. I don't think they necessarily had to go outbid North Carolina State to get their former coach. I'm just, the realist in me is hard pressed to believe that the year that you're down on revenue from COVID and you just bought out $4, $5, $6 million in buyouts for coaching staff, that all of a sudden you're going to start splurging. I think some of these guys, they were probably able to get cheaper than you would have thought. DJ Elliott, which did not have a job last year. So like, you didn't have to necessarily pay him as much as you were paying Jeff Knowles. I think, all that being said, I think that this administration, this president, this athletic director are more focused on athletics than recent previous presidents. I would agree with that. I think they view it as the front door of the university. You have a good football program, you have a good basketball program, you get more eyes on it, people know more about Temple, et cetera, et cetera. So I get the impression at the end that they are going all in on athletics. I don't think they all of a sudden increase the budget by $15 million this year, and that's why they're getting some of these guys.
Anybody else want to chime in?
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't say, Temple's breaking the bank on athletics, but you look at, colleges around the country now, it's like athletics are the, just the focal point of schools now. It seems like the academics are coming second. I mean, Vanderbilt is pouring money into their athletic teams. It used to be just baseball and then everyone else can rot in the SEC. Now, no, football and basketball are getting attention from down there. So your Temple, you got to throw some money up there, because that's really how you get a lot of people to go to Temple. Ooh, basketball, storied program, football. Ooh, Matt Rule, Al Golden, Jeff Collins, all those guys showed that football can be something up at Temple. Women's basketball, starting with Dawn Staley, Tanya Cardoza's early years. Like, no, you got to put some money into the program. So, and then you hired an athletic director that's coming from Texas and Georgia and a whole bunch of big time institutions. You've got to spend some money on athletics. You don't make that higher unless you're planning on it. So, I mean, I think the checkbook has been opened, but like Kyle said, I don't think they're splurging on a whole bunch of people. And I do think more hires have been made on discount than we would initially think.
Mm-hmm. I don't know that I could say it much better than that. I think that there are, previous presidents and who might say, hey, we're, as long as our student athletes are great people doing as well as they can, we're happy with that. I think Jason Wingard wants to win. I think Arthur Johnson wants to win. I think Justin Miller and his staff have things in a pretty good place. You typically hear a lot of good things about the Resnick Center. They've brought in a couple of former players to help out, whether that's a Javon Fair or Shabazz Ahmed. And, I'm sure they could always do more, but they've done a lot to support their athletes with mental health resources and stuff like that, and taking a global approach. But yeah, I agree with Kyle and I agree with Javon. I think that they do want to win. I think the fact that they made a change at the volleyball coach might say a little bit more than who they hired. In the past, that might have been like, you know what? And again, I'm putting words in someone's mouth here. As long as they're 500 and respectable, they're good. The fact that they're like, no, we're going to make a switch there might show you that, hey, we want to win. So I think that might have changed a little bit. I'm not saying that Pat Kraft wasn't concerned about winning, but I think that, yes, I think that this new president, new athletic director absolutely want to win. We're not looking at their, copy their budget report or anything like that. But I think it's a fair question to ask. So anyway, we're going to wrap things up. Again, appreciate all the mailbag questions we got from all of you. Appreciate you guys listening. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. You can find us on Apple Podcasts or all the major platforms. If you can subscribe, rate, and review us there, that would be wonderful. Hope you all had a wonderful holiday. We'll talk more basketball, more football next week as the staff continues to round into form, and we'll talk to you guys soon.